Welcome back to the channel. Right now, there's a major shift happening in the rental market, and it's something that both tenants and landlords need to pay attention to. Section 21 notices have surged recently, massively. In fact, according to Landlord Action, the number of Section 21 notices has increased by around 61% compared to the same time last year. That's a huge jump, and it raises some serious concerns. This isn't just a small fluctuation, it's something that could have wider consequences for the entire rental sector. In my view, this is a clear sign that the long-term effects of the Renters' Rights Act weren't fully thought through. In this video, I'm going to break down the latest figures, explain how many rental properties we could lose this year, and most importantly, why this situation may end up being worse for tenants, not better. I'll also explain what happens after Section 21 is removed and why that change might create even more challenges. Before we get into it, if you're new here, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications. Join over 54,000 people who stay updated with property news, house prices, interest rates, and investment insights. And if you find this video helpful, hit the like button. It really helps more people see this information. Now let's get into the data. Landlord Action, a company that assists landlords with regaining possession of their properties, has reported a sharp rise in Section 21 notices. They handle both Section 21 and Section 8 cases, so they have a good view of what's happening on the ground. What's interesting, though, is that this trend isn't uniform across the country. From my own experience, I have properties in places like Doncaster, Dorking, and Hastings. And from speaking with letting agents, the picture varies. In northern areas, there hasn't been the same spike in Section 21 notices. The likely reason is simple. Yields are generally better there, so landlords are more willing to stay in the market. But in London and the South East, it's a different story. Returns have been squeezed, mortgage rates have increased, rents have stayed relatively flat, and overall profitability has dropped. As a result, more landlords are choosing to exit. That's why this 60% plus increase in Section 21 notices is such a big deal. It reflects a broader shift. Now you might be wondering, why is this actually a problem? If you're a landlord, a shrinking rental market might sound like good news. Less competition means more demand for your property, potentially higher rents and more applicants. But from a tenant's perspective, it's a completely different situation. In 2025 alone, around 208,000 rental properties disappeared from the market. And yes, those properties didn't just vanish. Many were bought by first-time buyers. In fact, over half of all property purchases last year, about 51%, were made by first-time buyers. That's a positive development. However, even with that shift, demand for rental housing continues to grow. Every year, more people need rental accommodation. So when supply is shrinking, it creates pressure, and that's where problems begin. We've already seen examples of this in places like Scotland, where policies have been less landlord-friendly for some time. Measures like rent caps and stricter regulations have pushed many landlords out of the market. The result? In cities like Edinburgh, a single rental listing can attract hundreds of applicants, sometimes around 200 people competing for one property. Even tenants with strong finances and good credit can struggle in that environment, and once people secure a place, they tend to stay put, because moving becomes too risky. That lack of flexibility isn't ideal for anyone. Looking ahead, the outlook isn't encouraging. Last year, we lost over 200,000 rental properties. This year, estimates suggest another 220,000 could disappear, but personally, I think it could be even worse. We might see losses closer to 250,000 or even 300,000 properties. If that happens, the pressure on the rental market will intensify significantly. To put it into perspective, losing 200,000 properties represents about 5% of the total rental stock. We lost roughly that amount last year, and we could lose a similar percentage again this year. Meanwhile, the population continues to grow, and social housing waiting lists are already under strain. When demand rises and supply falls, the outcome is predictable. Rents go up, and that's already happening. Around 30% of tenants have experienced rent increases in recent months, and more increases are expected before regulatory changes make it harder to do so. Now let's talk about the major change coming very soon. Section 21, the so-called no-fault eviction, is being removed. This has been widely promoted as a positive step for tenants. Under Section 21, landlords could ask tenants to leave without giving a specific reason, usually with 2 months' notice. Going forward, that option disappears. Instead, landlords will have to rely on Section 8, which requires a valid reason, such as wanting to sell the property or move back in. On the surface, that sounds fairer, but there are unintended consequences. For example, if a landlord uses Section 8 to reclaim a property for sale, they won't be allowed to rent it out again for a year. So if the property doesn't sell, it sits empty, even if there's demand for it. That's a loss for the rental market. Another issue relates to tenant behavior. In the past, landlords often preferred using Section 21 because it was quicker and simpler, especially in cases of rent arrears or minor damage. Tenants would leave, and in many cases, landlords wouldn't pursue legal action for unpaid rent. Now, with Section 8 as the only option, landlords are more likely to go through the courts. That means more cases of tenants receiving county court judgments, CCJs, for unpaid rent or damages. And that has long-term consequences. A tenant with a CCJ will find it much harder to secure another rental property. Letting agents will see that record, and it becomes a major red flag. If they then turn to the council for help, they may not qualify for assistance, as they could be considered intentionally homeless. So instead of protecting tenants, this system may actually make things tougher, especially for those who fall behind on rent. In the long run, landlords might benefit from clearer records of tenant history, as it becomes easier to identify high-risk applicants. But for tenants, particularly those already struggling, this could create more barriers. Overall, while the intention behind these changes may have been to improve tenant protections, the reality is more complicated, and in some cases it may lead to worse outcomes. I'd be really interested to hear your thoughts on this. Do you think these changes will help or harm the rental market? If you found this useful, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and check out the other content as well. Thanks for watching.